Hi folks. Now, in part one of this series about the Scottish Enlightenment, we looked at how widespread education of its population had ensured that by 1700 Scotland was prepared and ready to explode into the modern age. But the spark that ignited it was the Treaty of Union with England in 1707. Just to get an understanding of this, we have to recognise that by 1700 the Scottish economy was in dire straits. Its ancient industries had reached their limits and it struggled to feed its 1 million population, especially when bad harvests hit, which they did. England, by contrast, had diversified its industries, established colonies abroad, developed new types of trade, and was beginning to emerge as a European superpower. Now, when in 1696 the Scottish Parliament tried to emulate their English counterparts by attempting to establish a colony of their own in Panama, the result was a national embarrassment that almost broke the country. Over half of all the money held in Scotland was allocated to this ill-thought-out Darien scheme, it was called, which ended in complete disaster, with thousands of the colonists who left Scotland's shores with such optimism losing their lives to tropical diseases. The Bank of Scotland collapsed and many of the investors in the company, including most of Scotland's leading families, were ruined. Now, what the Panama fiasco showed the people of Scotland, however, was that a political union with England giving access to English colonies and trade would be very much in Scotland's interest in this modern new age. And so, on the 16th of January 1707, the Scottish Parliament voted to enter into a union with England, and the nation of Great Britain was born. After a little bit of a rocky start in its first few years, the union settled down quickly, and trade expanded rapidly, with the city of Glasgow being the main Scottish beneficiary as it set out right away to dominate the global tobacco trade. So, with the Scottish economy booming and wealth being generated by Scotland's new breed of entrepreneurs, the stage was set for Scotland's university, in conjunction with its long-established and highly revered legal system and the Church of Scotland, to all come together to change the world. Two men, philosopher Francis Hutcheson and lawyer, later Judge Lord Kames, set the path that other famous disciples would follow in the Scottish Enlightenment. Francis Hutcheson believed that all human beings are born with an innate moral sense, a fundamental understanding of right and wrong, with everyone's goal in life really being happiness. When Thomas Jefferson, many years later, inserted the pursuit of happiness into the list of inalienable rights of man in the American Declaration of Independence, he was merely echoing Hutcheson's words. Hutcheson also stated that all humans were born free and equal, all humans, and that this was a universal right for all, regardless of origin or status. He argued strongly against the subjugation of women and of slavery. Liberty, he said, was the key ingredient in society that allowed everything else to progress. And his lectures at Glasgow University defined a new political and social vision, the vision of a free society. Now, Hutcheson died in 1746, but many of his students went on to become leading lights in the revolution in thinking that was just around the corner. Henry Hume, later the celebrated Judge Lord Kames, was no philosopher but a hard-headed Scottish lawyer. Now, Scots law differs substantially from that of England's. Scots law is based on Roman law, and its judges would always look beyond the facts and the evidence to explore what was fair, was it equitable, and was it reasonable. Unlike England, where lawyers were trained only to learn about precedent, i.e. what happened before, All Scottish lawyers, especially the senior lawyers who are called advocates, were required to gain a broad academic education and to develop inquisitive minds. Kames rose rapidly through the legal ranks, being a brilliant advocate when arguing a point of law in court, but also a tireless worker and avid scholar when outside. Whilst he agreed with many of Hutcheson's views, his cynical legal outlook led him to the belief that it was our desire to own personal goods and property that compelled us to draw together into communities, and it was because of personal goods and property that government and laws were required. Now, Kames famously organised the history of the human community into 4 stages. Stage 1 is hunting and fishing, which were the original occupations of man. And in this he would avoid other human beings, keep close to his family, and by and large laws and governments were not required. Once he had learned to domesticate animals, however, man would move to the pastoral nomadic stage, living within larger tribes or clans ruled over by a chief, whose word would be law. Following this, the agriculture stage came with the need for more cooperation with other humans out with the tribe or clan. Property has to be obtained, external relationships forged with workmen and traders, and laws were required to guide people in this. The ultimate stage for mankind, Kames argued, however, was the 4th stage, that of commercial society, where the buying and selling of goods and services leads to a new society with more benefits for all, but with more complexities, requiring better laws and governments. In developing his 4-stage theory, Kames answered the question that Hutcheson could not. Why, if everyone has the same desire to be free and happy, was this denied to so many people in the world? Kames showed that if people are free, material conditions will improve, government and laws will follow suit, and overall society will flourish. But if people are denied liberty, kept subjugated and poor, then society remains in a primitive state. So, an amazing thing happened in Scotland in those early years after the Treaty of Union. Rather than Scots becoming subjugated by the English, as some had feared, the reverse actually happened. Scotland was left to govern itself, but enjoyed the benefits of a stable government and a strong defensive structure, especially the British Navy, which protected shipping lanes. And it also had freedom to trade around the globe. So a whole new world of opportunity had opened up, and educated Scots of all classes jumped at this and quickly became renowned entrepreneurs. By 1758, Glasgow was importing and then re-exporting more tobacco from America than all the English ports combined, including London, and was rapidly becoming a commercial powerhouse. It was also developing its cultural and intellectual side. A political economy club was established in the mid-1700s, a literary society, a school for the art of design, and a Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, the very first in Britain. By 1790, half of Glasgow University's students were from industrial and commercial backgrounds, compared to just less than 8% at Cambridge in England. So here can be seen the first shoots of the commercial society that Lord Hume had envisaged. And if Glasgow was becoming a commercial powerhouse, Edinburgh was set to become a hotbed of genius. Very importantly, unlike London and Paris, Edinburgh's intellectual debating clubs were not dominated by nobles and aristocrats or controlled by the state. In Edinburgh, all ideas were equal. All could be and were debated, regardless of the social standing of the proposer. What counted to the Scots was brains and intellect. And one of the greatest men of this era was David Hume, the modern world's first great philosopher. He shattered the time-honoured consensus of intellects that reason was the guide to all human action. He stated that reason was the slave of our passions. In his first book, a treatise of human nature published in 1734 when he was only 26 years old, Hume argued that human beings are not governed by their rational capacities. Reason is purely instrumental in teaching us how to get what we want. But what we want is determined by our emotions, our passions. And as man cannot change his nature, society and governments have to devise strategies and laws that channel our passions in constructive directions. And by doing so, you get the best form of society when people choose to observe social rules and laws because it is in their self-interest to do. Hume also highlighted that liberty on its own can be a dangerous thing and that there had to be a stable centre of authority in society. He wrote that politics in a modern society had to involve a tension between liberty and authority. He foresaw that a totalitarian state would destroy society, something we have bitterly learned over the centuries, but warned that to preserve liberty, we must be prepared to sacrifice some of our own freedoms. So here was the framework for our modern liberal democratic form of government, and Hume's words have resonated down the centuries. Even today, thousands of people, including present-day students of philosophy, come to stand and gaze at the statue of this great man in Edinburgh's Royal Mile. Another giant of the Enlightenment was Hume's friend, Adam Smith, the world's first great economist. In his books, The Theory of Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations, Smith showed how the new commercial society envisaged by Lord Kames should operate. He argued the natural effort of every individual to better his own condition is so powerful a principle that it is capable of carrying society to wealth and prosperity. And he famously pointed out that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we get our dinner, but from their regard to their own interests. So here is the basis of a system of free enterprise, that human beings want to and can produce, when allowed to do so of their own free will, the goods and services that we all need, and in doing so will create wealth and prosperity that will benefit society. Contrary to what is often said of Smith, he did not propose unfettered capitalism. He saw quite clearly the need that society had to have a strong government that would provide a system of justice and protection of individual rights. What Smith also foresaw was that free enterprise offers the conditions under which we are able to forge our own happiness, something those labouring under the servitude or the whims of ruthless dictators can never enjoy. But the pace of intellectual change was speeding up even more. Edinburgh established its first daily newspaper in 1705, ensuring its literate population was well aware of national and international events. Monthly magazines and literary journals such as the Edinburgh Review, Blackwood's Magazine and the Scots Magazine were being published and were well read. The Scots Magazine is still published today. The Edinburgh Royal Infirmary was founded in 1727 and began pushing forward the boundaries in medical science. The Philosophical Society of Edinburgh was established in 1737. The Select Society, established in 1754, held weekly meetings in the Advocates' Library. The aims of the society were the pursuit of philosophical inquiry and the improvement of its members in the art of speaking. And the Edinburgh Society for Encouraging Arts, Sciences, Manufacturing and Agriculture was formed in 1755. And in Edinburgh in 1768, the Encyclopaedia Britannica was first published, thereby providing, for the very first time in the world, an educational resource for the general public. So, all these building blocks of our modern world were being laid in that intellectual hotbed that was Edinburgh in those very heady days in the 1700s. And educated Scots now began to make a major impact in many areas with groundbreaking discoveries and inventions that really did invent the modern world. And in part 3, we're going to look at who they were and what they did.